You're listening to Terror in Wichita, where we walk you through the story of the brutal murders in Wichita. Narrated by Max Bowen, written by Caranci, and edited and produced by Skylar Batz.
Chapter 7. A Penalty That Fits the Crime. Tuesday, November 5th, 2002. Despite the length of the trial and their thoughtful 14-hour verdict, the jury was not done. Rather, they were immediately charged with the awesome responsibility of determining what punishment to impose on the Carr brothers. In this penalty phase of the case, the defense addressed the violent and abusive childhood the two brothers had experienced, the violence they witnessed growing up, the abandonment, beatings, and deprivation they endured at the hands of those they trusted and loved. Forensic psychologist Mark Cunningham blamed their terrible childhood for their offenses, describing their upbringing as combining the 5 H's: hopeless, helpless, homeless, hungry, and hugless. Under cross-examination, however, even Cunningham was obliged to admit that, despite their horrible past, the Carr brothers still knew the difference between right and wrong. Speaking of Jonathan, Cunningham said, "There is no question he has awareness of his wrongful behavior." "He doesn't care?" Parker asked. "That's correct," the psychologist responded. Once again, the overall impact of a defense witness was more harmful to the Carr brothers than it was helpful. Perhaps the biggest jury impact came not from the mouths of witnesses, but rather from the mouths of the victims themselves. Andrew Schreiber said that because he still lives in Wichita, there are constant reminders every day. "One of the other effects this case has had on me are the feelings of survivor's guilt. I equate these feelings of guilt to ones that a soldier might go through." H.G., with heartfelt eloquence, noted, "I speak on behalf of Brad, Aaron, Heather, Ann, Andy, Jason, and myself. One of my favorite 7-year-olds lost her uncle on the 15th. This year, when her mom asked her what she wanted for Christmas, she replied that she had wings, and, if they were real, that she could fly to heaven and she could see her Uncle Jason and her papa. I wish life were that simple. I wish that I could put on a pair of wings and that I could go see Jason, but we all know that these are wishes, and they are wishes that we have to wish, because of 2 soulless monsters. Every day there is a memory or a scar that reminds me of that night. I wake up in sweats from my nightmares. I pace at night because of noises that I think are somebody breaking into my house. And every morning, I carefully blow dry my hair to cover up the spot that can no longer grow hair. I look at my knees and see the scars from the carpet burns that I got from the rape, and in the back of my mind, I wonder, will it happen again?" Her statement clearly touched the jurors. The most touching statement, however, was that of Heather's mother, Lois Muller. Noting that her heart breaks daily and that the heartbreak will last forever, she said, "Heather's eyes were filled with light and love and the Spirit of God, because she was filled with light and love and the Spirit of God. When you look into Reginald and Jonathan Carr's eyes, they have a hollow, empty look, the look of pure evil and hatred, and I know this because I have looked into their eyes." Noting the horrific things her daughter had to endure, Lois continued, "My husband still looks in her bedroom every day, thinking he is going to find her there. He misses her, and he carries this guilt that he wasn't there when she needed him. My mother can't get past December 15th. Her every waking hour is spent dwelling on Heather's being dead in this crime. She's not the grandmother Heather knew and loved. She's no longer a functioning grandmother to her other grandchildren. I want to be able to hold Heather again and tell her good night. God bless you. I love you. I can only hold her picture, and it's so flat and lifeless. I know Heather is in heaven, but I wasn't ready for it to be so soon." Ron Evans summed up on behalf of Jonathan by reminding the jurors of his client's background and lack of a serious criminal record prior to those 9 days in December 2000. Reginald's attorney, Jay Greeno, simply asked the jury for mercy for Reginald, the mercy that he did not extend to those 4 individuals. District Attorney Nola Folston asked the jurors to let justice, not sympathy, be their goal in establishing the penalty to be imposed. "You can't blame your family for what went wrong in your life," she said to the jury. "We know from the evidence they committed these crimes because they wanted to, because they chose to," she said. Friday, November 15th, 2002. Despite the expert testimony of 2 forensic psychologists, a medical doctor, and a peer reviewer of the Journal of Nuclear Medicine, Reginald's estranged wife and mother of his child, the mother of another of Reginald's children, a woman who had once hired Jonathan to do some handiwork, and a very emotional plea from the Carr's own mother, it took the jury only 7 hours to recommend that both Reginald and Jonathan Carr be put to death by lethal injection, a penalty many in Kansas thought appropriate. For each defendant, the jury returned 4 death sentences for the murders of Aaron Sander, Brad Hake, Jason Beaufort, and Heather Muller, a life sentence for Walenta's murder, and over 40 years of consecutive imprisonment for the remaining convictions. Conclusion. March 2004. The jury was long ago dismissed, with the gratitude of the court and an appreciative public. The Carr brothers saga, however, was far from over. In March 2004, the courts ruled on a wrongful death lawsuit against the state of Kansas brought by the families of the victims just 6 months earlier. In October 2004, the Associated Press reported that 3 of the families were to share $1.7 million, or almost $567,000 each, while the 4th family would receive $450,000. December 2005. 21 months later, the Kansas Supreme Court overturned the Carr brothers' death penalty, saying in part that the presiding trial judge, the late Paul Clark, erred when refusing to separate both the trial and the penalty phase of Reginald and Jonathan Carr. The Kansas Supreme Court's verdict sparked outrage in the community, rekindling talk of reverse racism. The case was appealed all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which granted the writ of certiorari. Wednesday, October 7, 2015 to Wednesday, January 20th, 2016. The case was argued before the U.S. Supreme Court on October 7, 2015, in an unusually long hearing that lasted some 2 hours. Subsequently, the court rendered an 8-1 decision on January 20, 2016. Writing for the majority, Justice Antonin Scalia held that the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution does not require courts in capital cases to instruct juries about the burden of proof for establishing mitigating evidence. Therefore, the trial courts in this case were under no obligation to inform jurors that mitigating circumstances need not be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Because the jury instructions in this case told jurors to consider any mitigating factor, Justice Scalia concluded that jurors would not have misunderstood these instructions to prevent their consideration of constitutionally relevant evidence. Justice Scalia also concluded that in light of the evidence presented at trial, the joint trial of defendants did not render the sentencing proceedings fundamentally unfair. Justice Scalia then ordered the case remanded back to the Kansas State Court for reconsideration. In a dissenting opinion, Justice Sonia Sotomayor argued that the Supreme Court should not have reviewed these cases because Kansas did not violate any party's constitutional rights. She also expressed concern that the majority's opinion would discourage states from developing techniques for ensuring fair procedures during capital trials. With the United States Supreme Court's reversal of the decision by the Kansas Supreme Court, the death penalties imposed on Reginald and Jonathan Carr were reinstated. The 2 brothers currently sit on death row at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. A silver lining. For Andrew Schreiber and H.G., the sole survivors of the Carr brothers' December reign of terror, life would never be the same. The 2, suffering from the post-traumatic stress of such horrific events, and the fear and trepidation that such stress carries, may understandably never forget the ordeal each was forced to endure in December 2000. Yet, despite the loss of trust in people, the hesitance to walk alone at night, or entertain even the well-intentioned plea of a stranger, there is some happiness that each experienced as a result. During the trial of Reginald and Jonathan Carr, H.G. and Andrew became acquainted. They also became friends, and shortly thereafter, they began to date. On October 2nd, 2004, H.G. became Andrew Schreiber's wife in a quiet ceremony in Kansas. The couple moved about 170 miles northeast of Wichita, but continued to call Kansas home. According to family friend Stephanie Carlson, the couple now has 2 children and live happily. They relocated to the small city of Shawnee, Kansas, where H.G. teaches 4th grade at the Mize Elementary School. In March 2010, minutes before HG was to start her school day, the Mize principal called an emergency meeting. HG didn't think such an impromptu meeting so close to the start of school could bring good news. She could not have been more wrong, however, as school superintendent Ron Wimmer, along with principal Pam Hargrove, announced that HG had been named DeSoto USD 232 Elementary Teacher of the Year. The award is given each year in recognition of excellence in the classroom, and HG was chosen as the 2010 district honoree. In accepting the distinction, a humble HG told reporters and fellow educators that she was honored to be recognized in such a way. Children have an innocence about them that is not found anywhere else, HG said. It's nice to be able to come to work and to have their view of the world surround me instead of the cynical view that most adults have. Understanding the horrific adult experiences that HG was forced to endure, it is hard to disagree with her.
Case.
If the Kansas Supreme Court wanted me to resentence them, wouldn't they have said that in the mandate? And the fact that they elected not to do that, isn't that significant?
The defense says this isn't the end.
Obviously, the defense has the opportunity to appeal that decision today, which they've already indicated they would.
The defense says it's going to appeal the court's decision today. A status conference between the defense and state is being set within the next 60 days. Reporting live in downtown Wichita.